Welcome to the Learn True Health podcast. I'm your host, Ashley James. This is episode 48. So our next guest had a health problem. And like a lot of us who are seeking true health, who are going out there and finding the information to help us solve our health problems, he did just that. Kevin Geary weighed, what was it, 220 pounds?
Yes.
And you were trying all the diets. I know I have been on over 30 diets in my adult life, which seems crazy, but I have had the exact same experience that you talked about in your video on your website. Your website is rebootedbody.com. And
Correct.
that experience being, well, conventional wisdom says less calories, more exercise equals sexy body. And so you kept doing that and it kept not working, or worked for a little while and then it would backfire one way or another. And so you did a lot of research and you discovered what works. You figured out the key. And now what's your health like? What's your weight like?
So I've been hovering anywhere between 170 and 180 pounds, just depending on what my current fitness regimen is. And I am very anti-obsessiveness, which is one of the reasons why I am pro long-term success. I found that one of the triggers for failure is obsessiveness. So when people are obsessive and then they fail very big, right? So I'm not getting up every morning and weighing myself. I'm not counting calories. I'm not tracking macronutrient ratios or anything like that. I'm focused on basically creating the healthiest environment possible for my body through eating real food and doing functional movement, and then focusing on the mindset and the psychology side of things, having a healthy relationship with food, a healthy relationship with fitness, and a healthy relationship with myself. So, I always struggle to answer the question like, well, what's your current weight? Because I don't really know. It's not something that I focus on.
Well, you look really healthy. Like all your pictures and your videos, like you look healthy. And now you're teaching others how to kind of break those old habits, break those old ways of thinking so that they too can not obsess and get the results they're looking for. So it's this sort of it seems contradictory because, we're taught the more you focus on something, like if you want an A plus, you got to study really hard, and so we think, well, if I put more energy into it, more obsession into it, I'm going to get the result. And yet that often leads to us having so many more negative emotions around it and failing, especially when we think I must deny my body nutrition, like calorie reduction, in order to lose weight, because that is not a long-term success. When you look at The Biggest Loser, which is one of those shows that I was obsessed about back when it first came out, but then I realized it was really messing with my head. Because, in a matter of weeks, you can watch someone lose 200 pounds. And so you get this unrealistic idea about what you can do. And when people would lose 14 pounds in 1 week, meanwhile, they're eating like a celery stick and exercising 12 hours a day. And then if you follow them a few years later, they did not keep the weight off. They did not. I mean, some of them did, but some of them didn't achieve long-term success. And that's ultimately what we're all looking for, is to live like you are now, not obsessed about it, eating good foods that taste great, that are full of nutrition, functional exercise, meaning. Now explain what functional exercise is. That just like doing things you like that are fun to do that happen to be movement?
That's part of it. It's movement and fitness practices that translate to the real world. So for example, the very popular exercise of going to the gym and doing bicep curls, for example, is not a movement that translates to the real world. It's a movement that can make your biceps look bigger and more well-defined, but it doesn't translate. And one of the biggest, I guess the best way to explain it is if you looked at gymnasts, right? Gymnasts tend to have a very strong-looking athletic physique. it is undeniable that they move extremely well in the environment. Contrast that with a bodybuilder who does not do an athletic endeavor like that. Try to take a bodybuilder and teach them gymnastics type movements, right? Using their body in the natural environment, and it's a complete disaster, right? They've completely lost mobility and flexibility, and they're bulky, and it just doesn't work, right? So they have kind of dedicated themselves to fitness practices that don't translate to the real world. And by the way, sometimes these are people that look great by all superficial standards, but throw their back out or completely mess up their knee, doing something that's very simple and straightforward because their body's so like tightly strung. And again, they don't have the mobility, they don't have the flexibility, and things just aren't in balance. So that's kind of, I think, the best way to explain it. And unfortunately, the mainstream health and fitness industry is based on movement practices for aesthetic reasons versus movement practices for athletic reasons or reasons that translate to the real world.
Right. And so what do you do? Like, or what do you, when you help people, me, for example, I sit at a desk 8 hours a day. I have a 14-month-old that I chase after, but I don't have to chase him too far because he just learned to walk. He hasn't learned to really run yet.
Yep.
He's about to. And so I'm busy throughout the day, and so grocery shopping, cooking, laundry, sitting at a desk, and there's just doesn't seem like any time at the end of the day to do something. Someone like me, how do you help them to integrate functional, fun movement and exercise in their life?
So I kind of divide this into two different categories. There's a core movement practice that we need to focus on, and then there's a supplemental movement practice that we need to focus on. So the very foundation of the core movement practice is low level movement throughout the day. Intentional walking, going on intentional walks like 30 to 60 minutes a day is very important. But aside from that, doing things like yoga, things that are very restorative, and just not being sedentary in general. So for example, right now I'm standing up as we record this podcast. I actually just recently transformed my office. So I actually have a desk now. It's called an autonomous desk. And you can make it sit or you can make it stand just by pushing a button, and it's got motors in the legs.
I have
And so
seen
it'll drop
one.
the desk down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it drops the desk down to sit at. And then, so about every, hour, I'll sit down for 20 minutes and then I'll stand again and do another hour of working while I'm standing. And then I might walk around a little bit. So I'm just kind of combating this sedentary behavior. I have to work at a computer, right? That's the work that I do. So I'm finding different ways to combat that. That is the core or the foundation of the core movement practice. Then on top of that, we would need to make a list. This is a concept called DWYLT, DWYLT, do what you love today. You make a list of all the physical activities that you love and that inspire you. And these activities are going to make up the rest of your core movement practice. And the reason this is in the core movement practice is because these are things that do not require willpower and do not require discipline. So for example, on my list, I have Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I have tennis, I have rock climbing, I have flag football with friends. So my goal is not to do all of these things. My goal is to focus on what's inspiring me most at the current time. So right now that happens to be tennis. I'll use that as an example. Do I need willpower to go play tennis? Absolutely not. Do I need discipline to go play tennis? Absolutely not. I'm driven by intrinsic motivation. So I go and I play tennis for 2 hours. By all accounts, it's an amazing workout. It's me moving in the real world. I'm also outdoors, which is a great benefit. So I'm fulfilling this movement practice that my body needs to stay in shape and to stay healthy. But I'm taking all of the antagonistic aspects out of it. Whereas if I was saying, okay, my core movement practice is going to be P90X, so I'm going to put in these DVDs and I'm going to do P90X. And here I am like slaving away. First of all, P90X is very, intense. It's designed with this concept of like wearing you down and beating yourself up, because that's what makes a great workout according to the health and fitness industry. So what do we see? We see people saying, oh gosh, I need more willpower to do my P90X. I need more discipline to do my P90X. Or we could just stop doing that you don't like to do. Sorry for the language. I don't know. I don't know if your
I'll beep it
podcast
out.
is language friendly. Okay, good. So let's just stop doing stuff that we don't like to do, and let's transition to doing stuff that we love to do. And what happens is not only are you happier and healthier, but you're happier and healthier for a very long time, because there's no falling off the wagon or losing motivation or any of those common challenges that people run into.
I love it. Yeah, I'm thinking that, if someone likes golf or just playing tag with their kids, running around, or like thinking about different activities that wouldn't seem like slaving away at the gym. So tennis might not be for everyone. I love tennis. I used to play tennis all the time with my mom, and I'd absolutely love to play tennis again. So those are things that you can put on the fridge. It reminded me of what you do with your kids. Get a list of all the things that they could do on a rainy day, and so they're not just sitting in the front of the TV. It's like, no, 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 no TV. I've been studying how to like prevent the screen time since I know my kid's only 14 months old, but like I'll blink and all of a sudden he'll be 7 and we'll have to figure out how to restrict the TV. And so I learned this technique where you get a list and you work with your child to get a list of all the activities they really love to do indoors, and then get another list of all the activities they like to do outdoors, and you put it up on the fridge. And it could also be like a list of chores that they like to do, that kind of thing. And so if they go, Mom, I'm bored, can I watch TV? It's like, no, but you can pick three things to do off the list on the fridge, including, activities that would be exercise. And so we could sort of do that for our adult selves.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And that's the key, is that my list is my list. Everybody's going to have their own list. And then we run into the objection of, well, I don't have any physical activities that I like to do. It's not really kind of part of my mindset. And to that, I say, I think the people who are struggling with that idea are very, very trapped inside of their comfort zone. They're afraid to get out and try new things. They're possibly even afraid to get out into the world and kind of put themselves out there in that way. So the comfort zone is one of the manipulators of behavior that I talk about a lot. You have this great intention, right? But for some reason, you can't align your behavior with that intention because you're being manipulated. And that's one of the manipulators. Your comfort zone triggers negative self-talk that tells you to sit down and shut up and don't do that. Like, don't follow that idea, right? That's too scary. That's outside of the norm. It's much safer to just do nothing. Or go back to your old habits or whatever, right? So getting out of your comfort zone and trying new things would be the first step towards developing a list like that.
I have two friends that moved here to the Seattle area from Minnesota area. I somewhere in the Midwest. I can't remember right now. But when they moved here, one of the first things they did after finding an apartment was they went on Meetup and they found an adult co-ed softball team. Because they're married and they loved softball, and they wanted to play with other people, and they immediately made a ton of friends. And so that's something. It's like baseball, softball, basketball. Think about something that you could start with, or golf, or mini putt, anything, get yourself moving. But meetup.com is a great place to do that and find. I find that when I'm doing an activity with friends, I will push myself without thinking about it. So like if I go on a walk on my own, it's a 5-minute walk. Like 5 minutes feels like an hour. But if I go for a walk with friends or with my husband, I'm more likely to walk half an hour without thinking about the time. And so I just know I have to, when I walk, I have to walk with someone, or else I'm not actually getting a good workout. So That's just me
Well,
personally.
yeah, and really what you're doing is you're layering benefits. So all human beings have this craving for connection and relationships. So when you are doing a physical activity that you love and that inspires you, and you're doing it with other people, not only are you fulfilling this core craving for movement and health, but you're fulfilling the core craving for connection and relationships. So that's something that, again, P9, I hate to harp on P90X. Actually, I don't hate to harp on it, but you're not getting that with P90X, doing a DVD in your room by yourself, So just there are countless examples of how this philosophy is far more productive and sustainable and practical than the traditional philosophy. And I think, people will hear it and say, look, it sounds too simple. Like, this isn't rocket science. And the key here is that people just need permission to do this. People need permission to create a list and do activities that they love and that inspire them, and stop slaving away with traditional exercise, because their mindset is currently manipulated by the health and fitness industry that says, if you're not beating yourself up, you're not winning. If you're not tearing yourself down, it's not an effective workout. That's what they've been hearing for decades. So when I say go play tennis, go do yoga, go do stuff you love, they're like, is that really, like, I don't think that's going to do it for me, but it does. You just need permission to go do it, permission to go have fun. This doesn't need to be a destructive or a very difficult process.
Yeah, people think yoga is just stretching, and I remember how absolutely shocked I was the day after my first hatha yoga class. I was so sore. I could not believe, I felt like I had done 2 hours of weightlifting in the gym, and all I did was like move my body around and breathe. Hatha yoga is a
Yeah.
big workout. Do you have any other styles of yoga that you really enjoy or recommend?
No, I don't do it on a regular basis. And here's why. So I said I have a list, and I named off just a couple things. There's like 12 to 14 things on my particular list. And yoga to me is more of a supplemental activity. It's not an activity that I love to do all the time, but every now and then I'll get like an itch for it, and then I'll go do it, right? And that's kind of how a lot of the things on my list are. There's a few primary things that take up most of my time and that I'm doing week after week after week. And then there's some other things on the list where it's like every now and then I really like get an itch for that, and then I go do it. It stays on my list, of course, because I want these things to stay like top of my mind. But that's kind of how the list works. So that's another aspect to it, that I don't want people to get overwhelmed. And if they have, 10 things on their list, suddenly they're like, how do I rotate all these things? How do I fit them all in? That's
Right.
not the point. The point is to just do the things that really inspire you most in any given week. And then the other things can just sit there until they come up, until you have that urge to do them.
You're jogging my memory, and I'm realizing to make my list, I need to think about all the things I'd like to do as a kid, like all of the activities
Yeah,
that
that's a great way to start.
you couldn't hold me. You could not stop me from water skiing, from snow skiing in the winter, from snowmobiling, from, hiking in the woods, and dodgeball. So I'm thinking, man, I need to like go on Meetup and find some like adult dodgeball groups.
Absolutely. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's go back to the comfort zone. Somebody may think that exact same thought, right? And then they get on meetup.com, and what starts swirling through their heads is, oh, I'm not going to know any of these people. Oh, am I going to look stupid playing dodgeball? Is this a dumb idea? And then suddenly, 10 minutes after they had this great idea, they've completely talked themselves out of it, and they do nothing. Right. So I think it's important to warn people that that is a big possibility when they start to make this list, and to be aware of that so that they can counteract it, and not listen to those voices.
So how do you help people not listen to those voices, and end the behavior, or end the social anxiety that comes up when we begin to try to get out of our comfort zone?
So that's a really deep and complicated question. But the short answer is that we all have an authentic self, and that self, if things are going great for us, it means that self is in the driver's seat. And then surrounding that authentic self, we have these subpersonalities, and this is a very important concept for people to understand. Subpersonalities all want different things, and they may coerce your behavior and lead to destructive consequences. But the key thing to understand is that all of these subpersonalities want what's best for you. Okay. Now, you may have a perfectionist subpersonality. You may have a people pleaser subpersonality. There's a whole laundry list of different personalities that you may have. And the other powerful aspect to this is, if you think about how people talk about themselves, very often they say things like, I'm a perfectionist, I'm a people pleaser, right? They have many, many different terms. And the reality is that they are not a perfectionist. They have a part of them that has perfectionistic tendencies, right? They have a part of them that tends to people please. And when that part is triggered, then of course they have behavior that shows up like that, that manifests like that. But if they can separate themselves and say, that's not my authentic self, that's just a part of me. And then they start to identify, like, where did this part come from? What is it trying to tell me? Why is it trying to manipulate my behavior in this way? And you start to unpack all that. You start to realize, and again, subpersonalities are what primarily drive negative self-talk and these messages that are counter to what our intentions are, to what our goals are. So you start to understand where this is coming from, and that decodes the self-talk. And then, of course, if you have issues with just self-esteem in general or self-love, there's a possibility that you just don't talk very nicely to yourself in general. And that kind of needs to be decoded separately. Talk with people all the time about this, how to remap your negative self-talk.
I love that. Stephen Flansbaum, who's a licensed mental health counselor, was on the show twice, and he says if we look at the relationship we have with ourselves, you'd want to call the cops because we're so abusive to ourselves.
Absolutely.
When he
Yeah.
said that, I mean, I had a complete aha moment because you think you can be hard on yourself, that's fine, it's you. But then when you look at how you treat yourself as two separate people, as like a relationship, it's like you're really being abusive to yourself. And so I caught myself every time I had negative thoughts, I caught myself going, wait a second, I'm abusing myself. I need to stop that. No. And so
Yeah.
it was this little, like, every time I caught myself, I was going, no, I need to reinforce positive behavior. I need to treat myself like I love myself. What the heck? And I couldn't believe how many times I had to catch myself. So it was so, unconscious. What you're describing as these parts, these sub sort of personality parts, these sounds like limiting decisions that we came up with somewhere in our life. So like we're on the playground and we got bullied and we decided that we're not good enough or we're not loved, and then we're sort of like an unconscious program, we're running from that program, or that program
Yeah.
is running us if we're not consciously getting a hold of our thought process. And so this is the big struggle, because I actually just saw this on, I was looking at on Facebook. You can see the history of things that you've shared in the past. And last night I was looking at the things that I shared on that particular day. And like something like 5 or 6 years ago, I shared a quote that said, "You can't think yourself out of a problem you behaved yourself into."
Mm.
And that's sort of what you're saying, is that people are trying to, grab a P90X, or grab a, go to the gym, or, starve themselves on a diet. And meanwhile, there's all these behaviors that have led them to where they are. And so they're not looking at the root cause. They're just
Yeah.
treating it, they're just treating the symptoms, not the root.
That is the synopsis of the mainstream health and fitness industry. Yes, is to put a Band-Aid on everything and not really pay attention to the stuff that actually matters. And of course, that benefits the health and fitness industry because people never actually do any work that gets them to where they want to go truly. Like superficially, it'll happen for a month or 2 months or 3 months. We see this, right? Somebody has initial success and then it all falls apart, unfortunately. And that's because the Band-Aid eventually gets ripped off. And the Band-Aid was really never doing anything in the first place. It seemed like everything was on track. And the health and fitness industry is masterful at doing that. And every new program they come out with makes new promises in a different way and has shiny new packaging, and all of the new types of equipment they release seem so promising. And it just continues to get people to latch on year after year after year to these new ideas that are just simply recycled ideas, or they're new ideas based on all the same faulty premises. So getting people out of that loop, number one, has been my primary focus. But if you look at going back to, the comfort zone, it's the reason why somebody doesn't go to meetup.com and join a dodgeball group, like you said, was a great idea, is the same reason they don't go ask the boy or girl to dance at the middle school dance, right? So it's like the exact same things that are affecting them then are still affecting them decades later. That is the destructiveness of the comfort zone. And unfortunately, if they have a middle schooler who comes to them and says, I'm afraid to do this, the parents see it as like, that's so dumb. Like, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Like, just go ask the girl to dance or whatever. And guess what? The parent isn't even following that advice. They've been stuck in that same model since they were in middle school. They think that it sounds silly, but they're still doing it themselves. They won't, just like their middle schooler won't go ask the girl to dance, they won't go join the dodgeball group, right? So they still haven't fixed anything, and that's really unfortunate.
This concept of the safety zone, the comfort zone. Mm-hmm. It's really funny. I studied neurolinguistic programming, and my teacher said that this comfort zone is the gray zone. This sort of like not great, not bad. And when he analyzed it with us, we understood it became like purgatory, because if you stay in your comfort zone, it actually becomes like a slow death in your life. You're not fully living. You're not dead yet, but you're not living.
Right.
And when we looked at it, and it's like, okay, so here's the benefit. The benefit is you don't get rejected. Like, do you know anyone that's died or been like put in the hospital injured from rejection? Like, is there a physical, threat to your life? And we're like, no, of course not. And he goes, okay, so there's no physical threat to your life if someone says no to you, or someone rejects you, or someone, rolls their eyes at you. There's no actual harm other than, maybe your ego gets bruised.
Right.
And then it's like, well, what are you missing? So what is this costing you to live in the comfort zone? What is this costing you? Because we know now that it's saving you from someone rolling their eyes at you, big deal, or telling you no, or having a socially awkward moment where maybe it's a little bit emotionally painful, but there's no long-term physical harm. And what it's costing you is vitality, connection, love, energy, now it's movement, health, relationships. And it was like the list went on and on and on and on. And by the end of it, we really realized that staying in this gray zone, in this comfort zone, was more painful than stepping out of it. And by the end, we wanted to step out of the comfort zone constantly, because when we did, that's when we felt the most alive. So when you don't feel alive, when you don't feel connected and full of energy, that means that you are living in the slow death, zone. And you need to get out and do something new, because that is where your life is. That's where living happens. So yeah, it's definitely pushing myself to get out of those comfort zones, and thank you for the reminder. So you help
no
people
problem.
with getting them to the point where they're doing fun activities like tennis or dodgeball, or something that they'd love to do, so it doesn't seem like exercise. So all of a sudden now they're physically fit, because they go hiking with their dog, and instead of slaving away P90X, which is, by the way, collecting dust in everyone's house. I actually tried to get rid of the P90X on a garage sale, and I think I tried 3 garage sales and I couldn't get rid of it. So Everyone else already has it and it's already collecting dust. And so you help people that way. So now they're doing great movement. Now you talk about this concept of whole foods.
Mhm.
That, so now we're addressing the diet because now we have to stop obsessing about diet and just eat good food.
And but before we get to nutrition, can I do there's one more part to the
Yeah,
movement piece. Okay.
please.
So that was the core movement practice that I outlined. There's also a supplemental movement practice. And what I found is that if you look at anybody's random list of physical activities, there's usually going to be a couple things missing. The first one is lifting heavy things. And human beings just really have a need to engage their muscles in that way, to lift heavy things from time to time. Not all the time, just from time to time. And physical activities that people love and that inspire them, just the way they're set up, typically don't involve that, right? So that's one. And then the second one would be a higher intensity of movement. And again, the activities that we tend to choose may have that. Like tennis has it a little bit, but not really to the point where it starts to become very effective for performance and body composition change and things like that. So the two things that I recommend people supplement with are lifting heavy things and high intensity interval training or sprinting of some sort. And you can sprint while you're swimming, you can sprint on land, you can sprint on a bike. There's a lot of ways to do it. But if you're not getting that, if you analyze your activities and you're not getting those things in those, then you'll want to install a supplemental movement practice. And this doesn't have to be really complicated. It doesn't, again, require any fancy equipment. So for example, using myself, 2 days a week, about sometimes it's 1 day a week, sometimes it's two, whatever, it doesn't matter. You don't have to obsess, you don't have to be perfect, but about 2 days a week I'll do a 20-minute sandbag routine. It's a very heavy sandbag and I'm doing compound movements, so I will like clean the bag, or I'll bring it up, I'll do a squat, then I'll push it overhead, I'll do a burpee in between or whatever, but I'm lifting this very heavy sandbag and I'm doing only like a 20-minute routine. I'm not trying to do an hour at the gym doing Olympic lifts or anything like that. I'm just kind of fulfilling this need as a supplement. And then on top of that, I'm doing the high intensity interval training just in the form of sprinting. So I might go out for a walk, and then at the end of the walk, when my body's really warm, I might do 20 minutes of sprints. And that might look like just 10 sprints, maybe 3 short sprints, 3 medium sprints, 3 long sprints. And with the rest in between, that ends up being about 20 minutes. And then I go home. And I've kind of fulfilled that need for just maximum output. Nothing really compares to going from 0 to 100% in that burst and doing it over and over and over again. And really, the body kind of needs that. So if you're not getting that in other activities, then I would recommend supplementing with it. So that's just on top of the core movement practice that I outlined, which does the bulk of what you're doing. Just like with nutrition, if you have this nutrition philosophy that does the bulk of nourishing your body, but there may be some requirement for supplementation. The same thing is true for movement.
And for people who are totally sedentary and want to begin doing this, what do you recommend they do to get going? Because it's dangerous for someone to go from being completely sedentary, sitting, 9 hours a day, to sprinting.
Yeah,
There needs to be
absolutely. Yeah.
there needs to be a few months of getting the body, to the point where sprinting isn't harmful. So, do you have any recommendations for those who are completely sedentary but really eager to get started doing this?
It always starts with the low level movement stuff. It always starts with intentionally walking 30 to 60 minutes a day. Yoga is very restorative and healthy, gets the mobility and flexibility piece going, right? Then I work people into, so if we're talking about like my total body reboot program, for example, that's kind of the process, starting with low level movement. Then we will start working into body weight strength training, just getting a base level foundation of strength going, along with these other activities that they're doing. Their body's moving day after day. They're getting plenty of sleep. They're getting plenty of rest. They're not over exercising, which is a huge key to preventing injuries. And then we start working them into the interval training. And then last, we start working them into the heavier lifting type movements.
Great. So it's a so slow, steady progress, and someone isn't going from nothing to throwing sandbags and harming themselves.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Excellent. No, I'm really interested about you've got this program coming up called mycravingscode.com, which I want to talk about in a sec. But first, this concept of whole foods. Even
Hmm.
people who I know who say they eat healthy, who think they eat healthy, are still eating a lot of packaged foods, or even they're eating organic, but it's a lot of it's pre-made foods. And in the last few months, my husband and I have been gluten free for various reasons for the last about 5 years. And we just noticed, working with naturopaths, that certain foods we react to, like dairy. I just feel healthier when I'm not eating dairy. And anytime I eat dairy, I don't feel healthy. So I cut it out of my diet. I feel great. But in the last about 3 months, we've been completely grain free, sugar free, and so we're getting all of our carbs from vegetables, and we're just eating nothing out of a package. It's all stuff I have to make from scratch, which is great because now I'm really seeing what's going into our bodies and becoming very conscious of just how much packaged crap we used to eat. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So now, I mean, it's a restrictive diet, which doesn't seem like it fits your program, but I'm eating a whole foods diet. So not really obsessing about calories or macronutrients. I'm just getting lots of healthy fats and protein and vegetables. And so far, what I noticed cutting out sugar is I have no more cravings. That was a lot of my cravings came from constantly being on the yo-yo of up and down of sugar. So that was my experience with that. But now you have this diet piece where it's this don't obsess about your diet and let's get healthy. Share with us, what does that look like?
So, I mean, it's very similar. We take a real food approach, right? So we are primarily eating things that were previously alive, plants and animals. But we're taking a non-dogmatic approach. So, for example, like the paleo diet would have arbitrary rules where, for example, you don't eat dairy personally, but the paleo diet would say don't eat dairy because that's not paleo, and that they would apply that as a blanket rule across the board. Or don't eat grains, which then rice became excluded, and don't eat starches because potatoes like tubers, nobody really ate those back then. Like there's real foods that are becoming excluded and restricted
Right.
unnecessarily, right? So we're focused on, yes, let's nourish the body with real foods, but let's take a non-dogmatic approach. I did a very popular podcast episode with Arthur Haynes called "The Truth About Grains, Legumes, and Tubers," and so I would highly recommend people go listen to that. But what we are focused on, for example, in Total Body Reboot, is helping people identify, like you said, which foods work best for them, which foods lead them to feeling better, which foods do they not have adverse reactions to. So if somebody comes to the program and they determine through the process that dairy doesn't work for them, then dairy's out for them. But that doesn't mean the next person who joins, we're going to say dairy's out for you too. So it's this process of discovery of what is working best for each individual person. And then, of course, I'm also educating people on, like, when is the best time to include starches? Do you need starches if all you're doing, all your physical movement amounts to is walking? Then probably not. That's not an environment where starches are really a necessity. If you're doing CrossFit because that's one of the things that you really love and that inspires you, and you're really focusing on performance, or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and maybe you want to compete or something like that. Now, all right, now we need to start talking about how to fuel those activities in a better way. So everybody, every single human being is different. We have to look at each human being's circumstances and go from there.
Excellent. So you help people sort of do an elimination diet where they're figuring out, you help people figure out what foods they're reacting to?
And that's part of the process. That's part of the process. But at the same time, there's also, you have to be very careful with an elimination diet, because the amount of restrictiveness that's often found in an elimination diet can then trigger the person to, quote unquote, fall off the wagon
Mm-hmm.
and binge and all of these. And if you lose the person through that process, there's no way you can help them. right?
Yeah.
So I think we have to be very careful about how we approach, especially with certain people and certain personalities, how we approach this concept of determining what foods work best for me at a specific time. And so there will be people who come to the program and they have that mindset of, I have to be 100%. I need to get the A plus, right? I need to do everything right. I'm not asking that person to start eliminating a bunch of stuff right away, because I know that the likelihood is they're going to slip up and then they're going to trigger the
Yep.
shame and guilt cycle, and
Mm-hmm.
then they're gone, right? I'm going to lose them. So that can't be the process that we go through. So again, just like it's different for everybody, some people personality wise, psychologically, can absolutely handle a period of higher restriction to find all that out up front. Other people can't. So just the same way nutrition has to be approached from a personal angle, so does kind of the psychology of the process.
Right, you're so right about that. I have to do it really well, or it's like an all or nothing. I have to just do it 100%.
Yeah.
And then they put, and because I've experienced this, but, and then they put
Yeah.
these impossible rules upon themselves. Like they're gonna go from completely eating whatever they want one day to like, so restrictive the next day, and then the cravings are there because maybe their family is still eating the old way, or they have to go out to a business meeting and also that's the only food available, and then they mess up or whatever, or they have a midnight craving, and then they
Hmm.
completely beat themselves up, and because now it's over now. I mean, I failed. I ate something that wasn't on the list. That's it. It's done. I'm out.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because I was talking to like a health coach a few months ago, and she said, "Why would you, if you have a flat tire, you pull over the side of the road and you have a flat tire, why would you slash the other three tires?" And it hit
Right.
me so hard because I was asking her about this behavior. Why do we do that? Like, what's going on? Like, okay, so I messed up. So I was calorie restricting, and then I had something and I went over, and I was like, that's it, it's done. She's like, why do you want to slash the other three tires? It's like, no, you go, you fix
Yeah.
the tire, you keep going. And it was
Well, and
amazing.
really, it's not you that wants to slash the other three tires. Going back to this concept of the subpersonalities, there's a subpersonality that's triggered, and that subpersonality is currently in the driver's seat, and that is the subpersonality that will get out and slash the other three tires, not your authentic self. Right. And your
Mm.
authentic self is sitting there even thinking logically about this. Like, all right, I just made a little mistake. I don't need to slash the other three tires. But sometimes they can't override that other
Mm-hmm.
subpersonality, and it happens anyway, right? So again, going back to that concept is helps people understand this process.
So during when they're taking your course with you, the rebooted body course, you help them understand that. So as they're going through it, and whenever, because people will, I think we create kind of these impossible goals. Even though you tell people not to obsess, they're going to.
Mhm.
And so when they're stuck in that mode, you have a system that allows them to see in that moment, this is not your authentic self. You're not coming from that. Let's help you analyze this, and so you can start to pull back the curtain and see what's really going on, what's really running your behavior.
So I used to address all of this stuff in the exact same program, and that was called Total Body Reboot. So we did the nutrition, we did the fitness, we did the psychology side of things, all wrapped up in one. And I found that over the years of doing that with men and women in over 30 countries around the world, that it's not the best way to approach it. So, for example, some people will come to us and they don't really have a lot of manipulated behavior. Like if you just show them the nutrition and the fitness and the lifestyle components that they need to change, they just change them. Like there's not a lot of resistance. There's not a lot of falling off the wagon and failure and guilt and shame. They just do it, right? So that person comes to Total Body Reboot and they see all of this psychology and mindset material, and they're like, I don't need any, like, I don't want to make them wade through all of that just to get to the pieces they actually need, you know.
Hmm.
On the flip side of things, there's people who already know about real food nutrition. They already know about functional movement, and it doesn't matter that they already know. They cannot do it consistently. They cannot figure out why they continue to fail, even though they know what they need to be doing, and even though they have these great intentions. So putting them through Total Body Reboot, now they have to wade through all the same nutrition stuff they've already heard and the movement stuff they've already heard just to get to the mindset and psychology things. So we decided very recently that we were going to split the program. So we're going to have Total Body Reboot that's dedicated to food and movement and healthy lifestyle habits. And then we're going to have Decode Your Cravings. And that is going to be geared exclusively towards eating psychology and behavior psychology. And then we're going to allow people to do one program or the other, or if they need both, then they do both. And now it can work for every single person that comes to us.
I love it. And is that the mycravingscode.com?
Yeah, mycravingscode.com is for the Decode Your Cravings program, and that is the mindset and psychology side of things.
Excellent. So give us some understanding around what drives our cravings.
So there's a again very very deep and complicated question, right? For people that have not committed to real food and functional movement, who are following a conventional dieting model, for example, one of the big things that drives their failure is the fact that they are applying antagonistic advice to their life. Like counting calories, right? Tracking macronutrient ratios, doing excessive, obsessive cardio exercise, beating the P90X. Let's go back to that, right? So they're doing all of these things that don't align well with their biological and psychological programming, and that always leads to failure. One of the primary subpersonalities that every single person has is an inner rebel, and that is designed to protect you from oppression and rules and restriction, right? So you apply these antagonistic principles that ask you to be perfect, that put a lot of rules and restriction on you, and your inner rebel is going to stand up and say, you know what, this really sucks, stop doing this immediately. And it's going to continue giving you that message louder and louder and louder until you self-sabotage and fail. So that is one of the big reasons. So by switching to amicable strategies, these are strategies that align with your biological and psychological programming. So real food and functional movement and doing what you love today and cutting down stress levels and not putting yourself under rules and restriction and shame and guilt. All of that alleviates that inner rebel. It no longer has a need to stand up and shout at you day after day after day until you fail. So that's a big part of the process. But now we have people who have already done that, right? They've switched to amicable strategies and they're still failing. So now we have to look at what I call biopsychosocial manipulators. And these are biological or psychological or social factors that manipulate behavior. And I've identified over 45 very common manipulators that people face. And going back to individuality, right? Somebody may come to the program and they are affected by 7 or 8 manipulators. And then somebody else may come and they are affected by 15 manipulators. And then somebody else comes and they're affected by 2 or 3 completely different manipulators, but they're big ones, right? So we have to look again, we have to help people assess what's actually affecting them. Then we have this concept of unfulfilled core cravings. So I tend to think that it's very unfortunate the way we've looked at cravings. We've looked at cravings typically as like a desire for comfort food or for sugar or whatever. And really that is a superficial craving, and it's something that puts us in a mindset of running away from things. Like we run away from specific foods. We run away from sugar, and we demonize sugar, for example. And I think if we redefine what cravings actually should be seen as, which we all have these core human cravings for certain things, like I said earlier, connection and relationships, right? Autonomy is one, self-actualization. We have these core human cravings that often go unfulfilled. And when those cravings go unfulfilled, we see a rise in the superficial cravings for sugar and basically for medication, right? Because it's very, very stressful for a human being to not have these core cravings fulfilled. And that stress drives the need to cope and the need to medicate. So if we start focusing on how we can fulfill our core human cravings and become happier and healthier in that way, what we find is that we are running towards something very productive rather than spending all of our time running away from something very superficial. So those are a few examples of what traps people in this cycle and what continues to plague them week after week, year after year.
Can you give me just some examples of core manipulators?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I said that we have identified like 45-ish manipulators. Some are very common. You're going to recognize like perfectionism and shame and guilt are all manipulators. Anxiety is a manipulator. Then we have other common things like financial stress. We have career unfulfillment. We have somebody going through a period of grief. We have people pleasing and perfectionism and performing. Low self-esteem is a huge one. Hormone imbalances is a physical one that's very common. Poor gut health is a manipulator. We have something called pattern paralysis, where we may just be stuck in a pattern that we have repeated over and over and over again since childhood. So a couple of my cravings fit perfectly into this category of pattern paralysis. As a child, we used to eat dessert after every single meal. And every time we sat down in front of a television, we would have some sort of treat. And so guess what? When I come into adulthood, every time I eat dinner, what's my brain signaling for? Hey, dessert, that's like the program that we're running in, right? You got to have the dessert. You got to go find something. And every time I sit down in front of a television, oh, before you do that, you need to go get a treat prepared. You know, we got to have a treat while we watch television. That is a pattern that I was stuck in for a long time. So this is just another example of, again, it fits perfectly into this concept of manipulators, right? I have a great intention of having a body and life I love, but this pattern that I'm stuck in, that I'm paralyzed by, manipulates my behavior on a day-to-day basis, or at least tries to manipulate my behavior on a day-to-day basis. So identifying these very, very specific manipulators that are affecting us right now is the path towards success. So then we can address them, we can heal them or overcome them, we can get the obstacles out of the road, and we start to achieve success legitimately. And when you do the work like this, you find that you achieve success for the rest of your life because you're not constantly stumbling over the same obstacles and the same challenges.
What's your success rate with this program? You've been running this program for how many years?
The Decode Your Cravings program is still in development. So like I said, what we did is we took Total Body Reboot and we're splitting it. And
Right.
when we split it and we started developing Decode Your Cravings, we did that from the ground up. So Decode Your Cravings has like, so the psychology stuff that was in Total Body Reboot pales in comparison to what is in Decode Your Cravings. But the Total Body Reboot program, when we were running that with the nutrition and the fitness and the lifestyle habits and the psychology all wrapped in one, we had a graduation rate of around 82%.
That's
So
fantastic.
very,
So is that
yeah,
when
it's
you say
very high.
graduation, do you mean they achieved the initial goal they set out to achieve when they first joined?
They finished the curriculum, and when they were finished with the curriculum, they were still applying the principles. They were still getting great results. And of course, we give people lifetime access to the program. Many people that are we have a private Facebook group on top of this just for kind of community oriented feel, right? So if you go into the Facebook group, for example, there's many, many people in there who have been now quote unquote in Total Body Reboot or finished it years ago, who are still maintaining their results and doing wonderfully. So it's hard to calculate any sort of rate like over 3 or 4 years because some people we lose contact with them or they've moved on with their life. And again, the whole goal of this was success to the people who work with me. Success looks like no longer obsessing, no longer having to stay constantly engaged with this idea of nutrition and fitness. Like the goal is that it becomes part of them, that
Mm-hmm.
they are now free to just go live your life, like go enjoy your life. Stop being crazy with all of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And thankfully, that's what a lot of them do. You know, like they don't have to stick around and continue harping on all of this stuff. They're kind of like free to just go be happy now.
That's awesome. And 82% completed. How many weeks was that course?
So it's changed a couple times over the years. It started out as a 6-month program. It's currently a 4-month program. But across all of the changes, it's been an 82% graduation rate. So people getting to the end of either 4 months or 6 months.
That is very high. I've studied with several people who sell online courses, and they say that I mean, these are really great online courses, and never does a 50% happen. It's always less than 50% completion. So the fact that you get 82% of the people to stick with something that's either 4 or 6 months long, involving their health and having breakthroughs, that's fantastic. I would say that's definitely proof of its worth and its success.
Yeah, and it's not just the program too. It's the mindset people get in order to do the program. So I'll give you an example. The vast majority of people who quit Total Body Reboot signed up impulsively. So they came to the site, they looked over the information page, and they said, okay, this sounds great. I'm going to sign up. And then when they got in, they really didn't know what they were getting themselves into, right? They start to look at it and they're like, oh, this takes like legitimate work, right? This isn't a race. It's not going to get me a bikini body, in 30 days like these other programs promise. I think maybe I got myself into something I wasn't expecting, and then they ask for a refund, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas somebody comes along and, man, they've listened to my podcast for 3 months. They've been on my email list. They've read a ton of my articles. They're in the right mindset. They know exactly what they're getting into, and they're committing to the process. So they've succeeded really before they even signed up. So I think that's what we can attribute that success rate to, along with the fact that, like I've said from the beginning, and why I focus on this so much, the psychology and mindset side of things is the missing link. You cannot just give people information about what to eat and how to move and expect that you're going to have a high success rate. It's not going to happen. But when you start to empower them with the insights and the tools that fix them or heal them on the mindset side of things, now they're empowered to do really fantastic things, and they run with that. The success rate goes through the roof.
Awesome. I just love that. Going back to the core manipulators, you talked about a physical one being gut health or hormones. Dr. Wallach, who's one of the oldest naturopathic physicians, he is sort of this father of mineral supplementation. And he says that oftentimes people have, when it comes to physical cravings, or a physical manipulator for cravings, it's pica or cribbing, where the body is literally starving for nutrition. And you see these kids who are, 300 pounds, 300 pound 12-year-olds, they can be malnourished, even though
Yep.
they're obese. We can be obese and malnourished. We can be completely depleted of nutrients because of the farming practices, because of the foods that we're eating, because of the SAD diet, the standard American diet, because pesticides and the chemicals they put on the foods actually chelates nutrients away from the plant and out of our body. So we're starving for minerals and for proper nutrition in the body, in a desperate attempt to gain those minerals is craving more and more and more calories. So that's
Right.
why supplementation is also so important. When I started taking Dr. Wallach's mineral supplementation 5 years ago, it was like a night and day difference. A lot of my sugar cravings went away, my blood sugar stabilized, and I really noticed a difference. But that was just on the physical side. The emotional, mental side, and all those things you're talking about, that's something that is so in the blind spot
Right.
that so you're helping people pull it out of the blind spot. So even we need to address, and this is holistic, I keep referencing this in almost every episode, holistic health is considering your mind, your body, your spirit, so mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health, and addressing everything. So making sure that you address human connection, like you're talking about, with connecting with people, and not just doing things on the physical, because we just do things on the physical. We're missing out on the mental, emotional, spiritual depletion that, or, cravings, or the unfulfillment that we haven't
Hmm.
addressed. So I'm really excited about this course that you're coming out with, the mycravingscode.com, because I feel it'll help people really address, what's in their blind spot. It's really exciting.
Yeah,
Well,
absolutely. It's one of the courses that we are most proud of and most excited about by far. Like the more we worked on it, and we're nearing the end now. It should be we're probably going to be releasing it in June. But the more work we did on it, the further we got into it, the more excited about it we got. And by the way, we put 60 people through it. We got 60 people to say yes to letting us build the program while they went through it. So we were getting their feedback the entire time on different aspects of it, and they've actually done the program as we built it, and their feedback has been amazing so far. So we're really pumped about being able to release this.
and I like hearing that you keep evolving your courses through paying attention to the results. So
Yeah.
that's fantastic. Now, before we wrap things up today, I'd love for you to give our listeners a challenge, something that they can do now and for the next 7 days to improve their health.
So this challenge is going to be a tough one, but I would ask people to sit down and think about any fear that comes with abandoning rules and restriction. Anything that, and this is all traditional. So needing a meal plan, developed by somebody else, needing a scale that they weigh in on, all of these factors, sitting down and asking themselves, what will happen if I get rid of all of these restrictive strategies and tactics, and really asking themselves, can I get comfortable with not having these things in my life? Because that's really going to open, I think, the biggest door for them when they can get comfortable and address any fear around no longer living with these arbitrary rules. They are going to start putting themselves in the right mindset for long-term success, because I can guarantee them that as long as they keep these rules around, they are going to run into issues. And like you said with sugar cravings, for example, I experienced the exact same thing. So I was ketogenic for a period in my life, and I found that when I was ketogenic, I did not have cravings for sugary foods, for comfort foods, that kind of thing, except when other things in my life started changing and things became really stressful with the job that I was in. And then the psychology side of things completely overrode what was going on physically in my body. Cravings came back, my old habits started to come back, and you start seeking the comfort foods and the medication, and boom, you find yourself back in the same problem that you had in the beginning, even though for months you were thinking, whew, I'm out of it. This is so great. And, I just avoid sugar all the time and I'm good to go. It doesn't always stick. It doesn't always stay that way. It doesn't stay that way until you address the actual stuff that's going on. And when that happens, you don't have to avoid sugar. Like, you don't have to look at sugar as this evil thing that if I eat some of it, it's going to completely take hold of me or anything like that. Sugar is just there. It just exists. And when I go to a social gathering, the food they have, and I have the context too. I use this bank account philosophy of my goal every day is to make more deposits than withdrawals in my health bank account. All right, I'm not talking
Yes.
finance, in my health bank account. So if I go to a holiday, I don't have to be a health Nazi. If I go to my mom's house and she has stuffing in the turkey and she has mashed potatoes with dairy in it and all this stuff, like, I'm not just going to be shoving this stuff away. Oh, I can't have that. I can't have that. I can't have that. It's against the rules, blah, blah, blah. I'm there to enjoy myself and have a great time. Like, I'm not a slave to these things.
Mm-hmm.
But because I consistently make more deposits than withdrawals, I don't have any negative consequences of these types of circumstances. So I eat ice cream, maybe once a week in the summer because it's really hot and it's really enjoyable. And we do this with our family. And that's amazing. That contributes to happiness. I think a lot of people are reducing their happiness because of this paradigm they're stuck in of, oh, sugar's not healthy, I can't have any of that. And again, just this rules and restriction mindset. So when I issue a challenge of think about what your life would be like without rules, without any restriction whatsoever, does that sound really scary to you? And why? And what could potentially happen? And just start looking into that, because if you get to a place where you're comfortable doing that, and then you say, I'm going to do the real work involved in being successful, that's when you find freedom. And that's when you find freedom forever, for the rest of your life. And you don't have to hide from anything anymore.
I love it because you're sort of decoding the dogma, like you said with the paleo diet. It's what are all these arbitrary rules about? Like it doesn't matter that you're not allowed to have any dairy. Like if someone isn't reactive to dairy, why can't they have it? It's totally
Right.
arbitrary. And I think that you're right. We've kind of created this dogma in our life that we don't realize we're living from, that we think we have to live from. And so to decode that and to go start questioning everything. Well, why am I doing this? What's going on? And is it okay to let it go? That's great. That's fantastic advice. Thank you so much, Kevin, for being on the show. I'm really excited to hear about your results with the My Cravings code and your launch. For those who want to listen to your podcast, what's the name of your podcast and how would they find it?
So the Rebooted Body podcast, and they can find that on iTunes or Stitcher Radio, or just go to rebootedbody.com. And there's a lot of articles there. There's some free guides. There's the podcast. There's some videos. And of course, there's our online academy. So come over, say hi, and we'll help you out.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Kevin. I think I'm going to go for a walk with my husband now.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care. Are you looking to optimize your health? Are you looking to get the best supplements at the lowest price? For high quality supplements and to talk to someone about what supplements are best for you, go to takeyoursupplements.com, and one of our fantastic true health coaches will help you pick out the right supplements for you that are the highest quality and the best price. That's takeyoursupplements.com. takeyoursupplements.com. That's takeyoursupplements.com. Be sure to ask about free shipping and our awesome referral program.